after you have persevered comes victory. And that's when you have that sustainable change. So, and I think about the new year. And there's this little meme on Facebook floating around, new year, new you. Right? Like it happens just because, right? And it's true that we have a new year. That just happens automatically. It's a change in the calendar. But how you enter that new year, this new year, is going to determine what kind of you it will bring. Unless you take the time and the focus and the determination, the perseverance to make changes, you're just going to be the same you. But if you take the time to go through the transition, go through the work, you can redefine yourself. You're going to define the outcome. So we make resolutions, we set goals, but we all know we are programmed for the least amount of resistance, right? So change is hard, and without perseverance, we're going to give up. It's just a given. Without a plan, we're going to fail. That's why you're encouraged to write down your dreams, write down your goals, write down what you want to see happen, because you need a plan. Then you need to decide, how am I going to reach that goal? I'm not going to lose 10 pounds this year if I just sit around and eat ice cream every night. Okay, it's probably not going to happen. Am I right? Yeah. So we need to make a plan, because without a plan, we're going to fail. And without the right people around us, we might never get started. How many of you have told somebody, you know what? I'm going to lose 10 pounds this year. And they look at you, no, you're not. Please, girl, please. You need the right people around you who are going to say, you know what? I think I will too. Let me join you. Let's do it together. That's the kind of people you need around you. So, maybe one of your New Year's statements is to follow God more closely. I know as a corporate church, we've been having prayer every night, and if you haven't been coming, I encourage you to come, because it's a powerful time. It's really good. We're reading, as Pastor said, we're reading through the book of Revelation, and we're getting some new insights, and it's really not as scary a book as you think. Okay? It's good. It's good, I promise. Yeah, never mind. I'll skip that story. So maybe one of your resolutions or your statement, New Year's statements, is that you want to follow God more closely. Be in His will. Do what He's called you to do. His will is never easy. It's never convenient. Let me just tell you that. Okay? It's worth it. It is worth every single moment, I promise. But it's not always easy. So you're going to need that perseverance, that determination, and to define the new you. How are you going to define the new you? And then how are we going to define this new decade? You know, we're moving into the 20s, as I said, we're moving into the 20s. Not the 1920s, but the 2020s. And we have the responsibility to define this decade. We have the privilege to define this decade. We have circumstances happening all around us. All kinds of crazy circumstances. Things that are beyond our control. But what we do have control of is our reaction to the circumstance. So how are we going to define this new decade? Now, the last 20s was called the Roaring 20s, right? And they were defined by flappers and jazz music and cool gangster outfits, fashions, and, you know, all these things come to mind, the Roaring 20s and what that meant. And I think of just elegance and all this excess, right? They had been through the Industrial Revolution that happened in the 1800s, and now they just won the World War I, the war to end all wars. We see how that turned out. So, but they had this sense of victory, right? And there's all this, the economy was good for a little bit, And, they had machines, they had cars, they had light bulbs in their house. They had indoor plumbing. It was great. It was a great time, right? So they had all this pride and arrogance, really, if you look back at the culture. And there were drastic changes in this culture, and it changed everything. Music, it changed art in all kinds of forms. Fashions, even the architecture of the buildings. You look around and everything that was made in the 20s is very iconic. You can look back and you see that the 20s was a very iconic time in our history. And here we are, transitioning into a new era. We have gone through a technological revolution. When I was I think it was in 4th grade, we learned about the Industrial Revolution. And I remember thinking, wow, for everything to change that fast. And it was within 50, 60 years that everything just changed. I was thinking, for something to change that fast, I wonder in my lifetime if we could ever go through a change like that. And wow, in the past 13 years, I have seen a complete turnaround in our technological advances. It's crazy. It's crazy. I heard a thing on the radio, not the radio. What was it? I don't remember. On something, it was probably on a Facebook feed. But they're saying how you can't get away from, no, it was the news. It was the news, sorry. I gotta remember, what am I listening to? Because there's just noise all the time. So you can't get away from the ads. And as soon as you walk into a place, then it pings on your phone. They know where you are. So then they start sending you ads for that place. And I've seen it. It's happened to me. And I'm sure it's happened to all of you. And they were really saying there's really no getting away from it. If you want to take advantage of the positives of this technological age, then that's just something we got to live with. You got to live with the ads. Okay. But it's just crazy to think about how far we have advanced, how far we've come. Look at our world around us. We have political unrest. We have wars. We even have a rumor of World War III this very week. We have wars, rumors of wars, broken economies, human trafficking, racial conflict, all kinds of social issues. But it's our response during this transition that's going to define us. It's our response. Our action will speak for itself. Our actions will speak. How many of you saw the movie Midway? It was a good movie, right? It was so good. It was so good. Where's Darius? Oh, never mind. I was going to tell him, yes, I go to the movies by myself, but I had Becca with me that day. All right, so Midway was such a cool movie. It was about World War II. And we were all familiar. We all learned about Hiroshima. We've learned about D-Day, the Battle of the Bulge, all those famous battles that, are contributed to winning the war. But I don't remember learning about Midway. If I did, I just didn't put too much stock into it. It was just a date that I had to memorize for a test, and then I let it go from my memory, right? But this movie was so good. It really spelled out or illustrated how this one particular battle, had we lost this battle, the whole war would have had a very different outcome. And it made me think about our enemy is always going to attack in the strategic place of transition. That's where we're vulnerable. That's where we're unsure of what we're stepping into. And that's where he's going to attack. So Midway was a strategical transition of World War II. And I just remember the scene. I'm trying to keep up with everything that's going on. This leader talked to this leader, and this secret's going through, and they're getting this one, and blah blah blah. So I'm trying to keep up with all this, and then it all came down to a point where this soldier, this fighter pilot, was talking to his wife, and he was visibly shaken and upset, and his wife was trying to comfort him, and he's like, you got to understand, if we lose Midway, there's no way we can win the war. If we lose this pivotal point, then they're going to come in because of this transition point where it is. They're going to come in, they're going to invade here, then they're going to invade here, and there's nothing we can do about it. And we're going to lose. And it was those fighter pilots, those fighters at Midway that understood that. They understood that we are at a time of transition, and if we don't persevere, if we don't fight this fight with everything we've got, then our whole nation is going to lose. And in turn, we know how that played out, and the powers that were brought down in World War II, our world would look very, very different than the world we're in right now. So the enemy's always going to find that strategic transition to attack. And to bring this to a biblical point of view, because we're in church, that's what we got to do, right? Yes, Pastor said yes. Let me show you a familiar Bible character, all right? And kids, you're going to recognize this name, David. I knew you knew him. We've talked a lot about David this year. We talked about how he defeated Goliath. We talked about his emotions, how he was hiding out in a cave at one point. He did a lot of stuff. He did a lot of really great things for God. He also had some big failures, and it was okay because he took it back to God. So we're going to look at David a little bit, just for a minute, because David and Goliath is one of the best battle scenes in the whole Bible, right? You've got the underdog, little itty bitty David, little shepherd boy who wasn't a soldier yet, just came fresh from the fields. He was just coming to check on his brothers who were the big guys. They were the big kids fighting the big armies, right? And they were in a face-off with the Philistines. The Israelites and the Philistines, they're facing off. It came down to this. And their big hero, giant Goliath, steps out and says, give me a man. We'll go one man against one man, and whoever wins takes the other team home. You get to be our slaves. And the whole army was afraid. But we know David stepped in, and he's like, why are you guys letting these uncircumcised Philistines talk about our God like that? Don't you know who our God is? And David's like, if you guys won't do it, I will. He let his out loud voice talk. That's what he did. And so we know the story that God was with David, and God slew Goliath through David's little slingshot and a rock. Something so little taking out someone so big. It's a cool story. But this was a transition. It came to the face-off. There was change. Change was imminent. Someone was going to lose. Someone was going to win. Someone was going home with the other team as their slaves. So David stepped in, and this was his big claim to fame. All right? This was when everyone started recognizing David, and everyone loved David. That's kind of like our Hiroshima. We think of that was the end all. That was it. That was the big drop, right? That was the big turn. But just like Midway, there's a battle behind the battle. I wanted to look and see how did they get in that spot where they were at that point of that face-off, that transition? And so if you will go with me to 1 Samuel chapter 14, we're going to look at verses 6 through 15. And we see Israel is facing a seemingly unwinnable battle. All right? So Saul is the king. Jonathan is his son. Jonathan went over and he attacked one of the Philistine outposts. We don't know why, he just did. But now that made Israel an enemy of the Philistines. Okay? So Saul tells everybody, oh no, now we are, we're a pest to these Philistines, and they're going to come and they're going to wipe us out. Okay? Because here's the statistics. Israel has 3,000 in their army. 3,000 men. Okay, you think, that's a pretty good size army, right? The Philistines had 3,000 chariots. Each chariot had 2 charioteers. So that's 6,000. Plus, they had soldiers, too many to even count. They couldn't even count that many. That's how big the Philistine army was. So they were coming after this itty-bitty little army of 3,000. And not only that, they had already invaded. So it says they invaded and there was no blacksmith found in Israel. You know what that means? There was no blacksmith to make the swords. There was no blacksmith to sharpen the spears. So they had no weapons. So not only did they only have 3,000 people to fight, they only had their fists to fight with. And so only Jonathan and Saul had any kind of weapons. So they had a sword and a spear. And so they were the only ones with weapons. The rest of the army didn't even have anything. So when Saul said the Philistines are coming, guess what the army did? They all hid. They're all hiding. They're running away because they know they're going to get slaughtered. Every man for himself, abandon ship, right? So everyone's in caves. They're hiding in the pits, rocks, thickets, anywhere they can find a hiding spot, they're hiding. So they're in this giant game of hide and seek with the Philistines. And so let's start in 1 Samuel 14, verse 6. So Jonathan said to his young armor bearer, "Come, let's go over to the outpost of those uncircumcised fellows. Perhaps the Lord will act on our behalf. Nothing can hinder the Lord from saving, whether it be by many or by few." "Do all that you have in mind," his armor bearer said. "Go ahead. I'm with you, heart and soul." He says, "Come on, let's do this." All right. Jonathan said, "Come then. We will cross over toward the men. Let them see us. And if they say to us, 'Wait there till we come to you,' we will stay where we are and not go up to them." And you know what's going to happen then, right? He's like, okay, so if they say, "Stay right there, we're coming to get you," they're going to come get us. But if there's that transitional word right there, but if they say, "Come up to us," then we will climb up, because that will be our sign that the Lord has given them into our hands. So both of them showed themselves to the Philistine outpost. "Look," said the Philistines, "the Hebrews are crawling out of the holes that they were hiding in." The men of the outpost shouted to Jonathan and his armor bearer, "Come up to us, and we're going to teach you a lesson." So Jonathan said to his armor bearer, "All right, climb on up after me. The Lord has given them into the hand of Israel." Jonathan climbed up, using his hands and feet, and with his armor bearer right behind him. The Philistines fell before Jonathan, and his armor bearer followed and killed behind him. In that first attack, Jonathan and his armor bearer killed some 20 men in an area of about half an acre. 20 men, the two of them killed. So, Jonathan took a chance. And I want to take a little artistic license here. Because you know that this means I'm going to tell the story from my perspective, how I think it might have actually gone down, but this part is not in the Bible, right? Right, okay. So, this is what I get in my imagination. When I think about Jonathan and all these men sitting in the cave, hiding out from the Philistines, I imagine a lot of testosterone in a very small place. And when that happens, I had a son, and I have a son, and I've had some guy friends, and when they sit around and they start talking, it can kind of get out of hand pretty quick. They start talking about mamas and stuff is bad. But so I imagine them sitting around this little campfire talking, yeah, those Philistines, they don't know. They don't even know. Man, if I was up there, I would do this, I would do that. You know, we should go up there. We should just go. Right? Jonathan's talking in this out loud voice. And he's telling them all these things he's going to do to the Philistines. And his armor bearer turns to him. Yeah, you know what? You're right. We could do this. Let's do it. Do everything you just said. Do all that plus some. Come on, Jonathan, let's go. He's like, that's a great idea. Jonathan's like, it is? Oh, it is. That's what I meant. It's a great idea. So this is what we're going to do. So they're planning it out. Jonathan doesn't even think about the outcome. Sure, he has an outcome that he wants, but what it comes down to, hey, you know what? The Lord is either going to save us or he's not. The Lord is either going to give us victory or he's not. There's really only two outcomes. Either way, we're sitting in this cave with all these stinky men. I want some fresh air. So he decides, you know what? The outcome is in God's hands. The action is in my hands. The outcome is in God's hands. So he was trusting in the sovereignty of God, in his power, not in his actions. He says, no matter what I do, God's still got the outcome. So we may as well do something. We may as well do something. He says, perhaps the Lord will act on our behalf. He didn't know. He did not know. So until this point, they were just trash talking. They were just thinking out loud. They were just, maybe even just telling stories. It was a thought. It sounded good. And yeah, everything starts with a thought. And we hear a lot, it's the thought that counts. Well, that's real sweet, but it's not true. God doesn't reward our thoughts. God rewards our actions. When we take that step of faith, it's the courage to act on the thought that is rewarded. That's what counts. So God didn't reward Jonathan's idea. He was able to give them victory after they acted. They still had to show up for the battle. They still had to fight. They still had to kill. They still had to do their part. Yeah, God gave them the victory. God made it possible, but they had to take the steps. And so that's a cool story. You know, we don't always hear about that battle. But I look back just a little bit farther in chapter 13, and I see Saul. And like I said, Jonathan had waged this war on one of the outposts, and it became probably a lot bigger than he expected it to be. And so all of a sudden, all of Philistine is coming to invade, and here we're going to look at Saul's actions. So chapter 13, verses 7 through 14. It says, some Hebrews even crossed the Jordan in the land of Gad and Gilead. Saul remained at Gilgal, and all the troops with him were quaking with fear. He waited 7 days, which was the time set by Samuel, but Samuel did not come to Gilgal, and Saul's men began to scatter. So he said, "Bring me the burnt offering and the fellowship offerings." And Saul offered up the burnt offering. Just as he finished making the offering, Samuel arrived, and Saul went out to greet him. So Samuel was the prophet, and Saul was given instructions to wait for Samuel. Before you take another step, wait for Samuel. Okay, Samuel's going to come. He's going to give you instruction. He's going to offer up the sacrifice. God will be with you. All right? So instead, Saul looked around him. He saw all his men fleeing, and he didn't know what to do. He panicked. He acted out of impulse. He's like, "Oh, I got to get God's blessing. I got to have God on my side. So bring the offering, quick. Bring it here. Let's offer it up." And when Samuel got there, he got there just as Saul finished burning that offering. And Samuel said, "What have you done?" Saul replied, "Well, when I saw the men were scattering and you didn't come at the time you set, and that the Philistines were assembling at Michmash, I thought, now the Philistines will come down against Gilgal, and I have not sought the Lord's favor. So I felt compelled to offer up the burnt offering." "Well, you acted foolishly," Samuel said. "You have not kept the command of the Lord your God, the command the Lord your God gave you. If you had, he would have established your kingdom over Israel for all time. But now your kingdom will not endure. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart and appointed him leader of his people, because you have not kept the Lord's command." Saul was the chosen one. He was the one that God chose. He was the one that was anointed for the line of Jesus. It was supposed to be him. It was supposed to be Saul that had the kingdom that would never end. But because he disobeyed, he acted on impulse. He acted out of fear, not out of what he knew about his God. Here we see Jonathan saying, "The outcome is up to God. It's not up to me. So whatever he wants is going to happen. I just have the ability to act." And Saul decided to look around him, see his men fleeing, see the enemy coming, and he was scared. He was afraid. He was scared. So he scrambled. He's like, bring me an offering. It's like us getting into trouble into some kind of circumstance that we may or may not have brought on our own, but all of a sudden we're in a panic. And we haven't talked to God in days, even weeks, months, some of us years. And all of a sudden, "Dear God, help me! Help me, I need you now! I gotta have you now! Oh, let me put a little bit in the offering." That's not what God requires. That's not what he's after. God is after obedience. He is after an obedient heart, a humble heart. So see, who did he choose? He has sought after a man. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart and appointed him leader of his people, because you have not kept the Lord's command. He chose a little shepherd boy who was in a field at this time, having no clue what was going on the battlefield. He was in a pasture with a bunch of sheep, looking at the stars, writing songs, declaring how great God was, how great our God is, the maker of the universe. He holds the whole universe in the palm of his hand. We serve an awesome God. He was getting the right perspective of who God is. So God's promises are true. Oh yeah, later on Samuel explains to Saul in chapter 15, verse 22, obedience is better than sacrifice. He spells it out plain to Saul. Obedience is better than any sacrifice. Any sacrifice, your sacrifices are so insignificant. Anything that we could possibly sacrifice in our own life is so insignificant to what he's done, to the sacrifice that he's made. And we want to whine and complain about, oh, poor me, I don't have 4G, first world problems, right? Our sacrifices are so insignificant. But what is significant to him is our relationship with him, our obedience to him, our knowing him. That's what's important. So God's promises are true, but there's always a part that we are going to be responsible for. He requires obedience. And his love is unconditional. Don't get me wrong. Salvation is free. That is unconditional. That's a given. But if you want to walk in his blessing, if you want to walk in the promises that he has for you, that victorious life that he wants every single one of us to have, there's a requirement. There's always a part that we need to do. Not just think about, but there's a part we need to do. We need to put feet to. We need to put action to. Promises are always connected to obedience. Now, Saul was putting his confidence in his sacrifice. He was trying to manipulate the outcome that he wanted, when all God wanted was obedience. Jonathan wasn't looking for an outcome. His confidence was in the fact that God had it under control. The outcome would be what he decided. So Jonathan put his faith in the one that held the outcome, and then he just took action. He didn't take action to manipulate an outcome. Do you see the difference? So God is not always going to map out our whole journey for us, but he is always going to give us the next step to take. Our journey is up to us. Psalm says to make plans and lay them before God, and he will bless your plans. So we have a responsibility. We need to figure out our journey. But God is always going to tell us the next step to take. And we can trust in that. We can trust that he's got us. He's not going to let us step off of a cliff unless he's halfway down to catch us. All right, even then, we can know that he's got us. And let me just read a few verses that might be encouraging to you. Deuteronomy 31:8. Do the right thing, 31:8. Do we have that? Deuteronomy 31:8. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord will personally go ahead of you. He is personally going ahead of us. Joshua 1:9. Be strong and courageous, for the Lord is with you wherever you go. Whether you're walking into trouble, whether you're walking into victory, he is with you. Hebrews 13:5. I will never fail you. I will never abandon you. He's with us. He's got us. Exodus 15:2. The Lord is my strength and my song. He has given me victory. This is my God. This is my God. I don't know who your God is, but this is my God. He gives me victory. This is my God, and I will praise him. So it was in this transition the scene was set for David to step into the frame. Saul was acting on impulse rather than obedience. Jonathan was acting on confidence in the power of God rather than an outcome. Action brings change, and perseverance wins victory. And when we were reading in Revelation the other night, I didn't have this put up on the screen, but Revelation, chapter 3, and verse 8, Revelation 3:8. I know your deeds. See, I have placed before you an open door that no one can shut. I know that you have little strength, yet you have kept my word and have not denied my name. Another version says that you have obeyed me. I will make those who are of the synagogue of Satan, who claim to be Jews, though they are not, but are liars, I will make them come and fall down at your feet and acknowledge that I have loved you. So it's obedience that he's looking for. And it says, you have just a little strength. It's just, even if we think that we have nothing left, we still have a little. We've got a little. We've got enough. He doesn't ask us to do anything that we can't do with him. It just takes a little bit of faith, a little bit of strength to obey what he has for us to do. His mercies are new every morning. And this morning we're praying for focus. We want to focus. We're praying for vision in 2020. We want vision in 2020. We want clear vision in 2020. And yeah, we need to focus on our goals. We need to focus on what we expect to see. But we need to keep God in the center, just like the song said. Jesus, you're the center of it all. When we can keep him in focus through everything, see everything through his lenses, the lenses that he gives us, through his love, through his eyes. When we see things through his lens, it makes sense. It all comes together. And we will accomplish great and mighty things. Things beyond our imagination. Because we serve a God who is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or can even think. That's the God we serve. That's my God. Right? The God that gives us victory. Yes. So plan on achieving those goals. Plan on getting closer to God. Plan on keeping him the focus of your year, of your decade. And then get around the right people. Who knows if Jonathan would have stepped out of the cave if he didn't have that armor bearer next to him saying, yeah, let's go. Let's go. Who do you have next to you saying, all right, let's go. I'm right with you. Not you go. Go ahead. Have fun. Bye. I got your back way back. You need those people that are saying, let's go. Let's do this. Let's do this. And then keep it up. Don't give up. Struggle. It's fine. Fight. It's fine. Just don't give up. Don't give up. Amen? All right. I got to the end of my notes, guys. For those of you who know me, I like to go on bunny trails, so I had to stick to my notes. You're welcome. All right. Well, we are going to have communion this morning. And I love explaining communion to the kids, as these are our symbols. We have things that are our symbols. We have money. That is a symbol. A dollar bill is a symbol. of somewhere in Tennessee or wherever Fort Knox. Is it in Tennessee? Fort Knox? Huh. Yeah. Somewhere in Fort Knox, there's a piece of gold or a piece of gold that this dollar is representing. So we have symbols that Jesus gave us. And he gave us a symbol of bread. And that bread, he says, this is like me, because he was broken. When he went to the cross, his body was broken. His heart was broken because of what they did to him. And truly, his heart was broken because of our sins. We break his heart when we sin, when we don't obey, when we disobey. That breaks his heart. And so he gave us bread to represent that broken body, that broken heart that he has. He wants us to remember what he went through, the sacrifice that he made for us. And he gave us juice. In the Bible, it says wine. And he gave us this to represent his blood. The blood that was spilled out when they pierced his hands, when they pierced his feet, when they whipped his back, when they pushed thorns into his scalp. He bled. He had a real body just like you and me. He hurt just like you and me. And so at the Last Supper, the last time that he knew that he would be with his disciples in this earthly body, he gave them these symbols to remember him by. He said, every time you do this, every time you break the bread, remember that I was broken. I was broken for you. And every time you take this cup, remember, I spilled out my blood for you. This is my choice. Jesus had a choice, and he chose to go through the suffering. He chose to sacrifice for us so that we could have that relationship with him, so we can be friends with him, so that he could be our God, so that he can win those victories for us, because he knew the end of the story. He knew that they were going to be sad for a few days because he's going to be in the grave and everything would look really, really bad. And, the disciples actually scattered just like Saul's army did. They actually scattered because they were afraid. But that didn't stop Jesus from completing the job. He rose from the dead and he won the victory for us. And that's what we're reading about in Revelation. So, we're going to pass out a little cup of juice. We're going to pass out a cracker. These are symbols, again, of Jesus' body and blood. And we're going to ask that you just hold it till everyone is served, and then we will take it together. Let's just go ahead. And during this time, if you would just reflect, look inside your heart, and really think about your actions, your motives, your thoughts. Are they pleasing to God? Are you walking in obedience to God? Or are there some areas that you need to give up to him, that you need to ask for his forgiveness? The Bible says, don't let anyone take unworthily of the Lord's Supper. And this just means examine your heart. If you're not a member of our church, it doesn't matter. You're welcome to take communion. And we invite you to do that. But just look within yourself. ask God to reveal anything that's not pleasing, just take this time to do that.